Anyway, my name is Graham Stowe. I'm an English professor here at Canisius University, and I direct the Writing Center. If it isn't obvious why I'm interested in AI and LLMs, it's because I'm interested in writing and why and how students go about the writing process and that sort of thing. And there's lots of questions I have that are ways to use it positively, and then I have lots of concerns about it in terms of it being misused. So what we're going to do tonight is we have a panel, and we're going to everybody's going to introduce themselves and explain a little about how they wound up here in front of you tonight. So, Humberto, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Well, very nice to meet all of you. I'm Humberto Hernandez. I'm the director for online learning and instructional design at DuBois University. I'm also an assistant professor for the School of Business there and the School of Pharmacy. I'm also adjunct at Southern New Hampshire in the business department too. And your question was like, how did I come about to just bump into AI?
What brought you here?
Yeah, so of course, all of us, especially as someone who leads, the instructional design team at the university and has 300 plus faculty members that we serve, back in December when I was really diving into utilizing ChatGPT for the first time, I had a meltdown. That was really exactly what happened to me. I was like, what just happened? Like, this tool is able to do so many things at so many levels, and so many things were crossing my mind as an instructional designer, as a director, as a professor, as everything, even as a student, because I'm also finishing my doctorate program right now, and I was like, whoa. I was like excited, but also a little scared. So the first thing I did was to text Jeremiah Grabowski, who is our dean of online learning. I said, like, hey, I think you might have already heard about ChatGPT, and if you have not, put hands on this like today. This is something that is really going to revolutionize the way that education just is taught, delivered, designed, everything you can imagine. And he replied like 2 minutes later saying like, well, I don't know what it is, but it seems like I need to definitely jump into this. And then we literally met next day and said, I know we're in vacation, but I feel like we need to plan what we're going to do with this technology that just became available. And we decided to start thinking about faculty learning communities. We thought that a proactive way to tackle this issue would be by actually getting all faculty in a room to talk about AI and bring all the concerns and really just tackle this from its roots. Hello, absolutely. And well, that's what we did. We brought we put a filler out to see who would like to join our faculty learning community. 50 plus individuals actually decided to sign in. We hosted a webinar, a first initial webinar, and then from that group, of course, 30 plus were actually part of our solid members of our artificial intelligence, learning community. And those are the individuals that are really guiding all of our AI academic policy, AI academic applications, explorations, and really just everything else at the institution that has to do with AI really runs through our learning community. And that's one of the ways in which I came about AI, and we decided to start implementing things at DuBois.
That mirrors our experience here at Canisius in a lot of ways. I had exactly the same. I wonder if it was the same night playing with it, and I asked it to write a freshman paper on the Great Gatsby, and it was not bad. Oh, it wasn't good, and I was like, "This is scary," and I wrote the dean and the associate dean and the English department chair, and then this happened. Maybe I skipped some steps, but this happened.
Right, so my name is Josh Kovacich. I'm currently serving as the director of IT for the Buffalo Public Schools. It's not all just asking people when the last time they rebooted their computer was. There's a lot of excitement in K-12. So my background's in programming. I've seen like firsthand how technology kind of is more about making an impact, bridging gaps, breaking barriers. It's not about algorithms and code. Occasionally it's about rebooting systems, but I've learned that there's like a lot of value in understanding how to effectively apply technology. Just as much value as knowing how the mechanics of the technology work. And that's something that kind of took a long time to understand. So my role like in education has really given me a front row seat to how people in how technology can really be used to amplify human potential. And that's kind of what led me to AI. I've seen what computers did, what the internet did later for education. It wasn't just good for education, it was good for society as a whole. And I think AI is like the next evolutionary step in that progression. So like there's this old lost Steve Jobs interview where he references this study in Scientific American where they measured the locomotive efficiency of a bunch of species on Earth. And human beings didn't even do that well. They were like a third of the way down the page. The most efficient animal was the condor. So someone at some point had a genius idea to test a human on a bicycle, and it blew the condor out of the sky. So his point was like humans are tool builders. He called a computer a bicycle of the mind because a computer was like a new piece of technology at that time. I think AI is like, I don't know, maybe the automobile of the mind or something if that's a bicycle. So, you know, I'm excited to share thoughts on AI. I think it's a big vehicle for change, and I look forward to an engaging conversation.
Hi, I'm Paul McAfee. I did not start my life out as an educator. I spent 3 decades in senior executive roles in Fortune 500 and global companies. And over those 3 decades, I had firsthand painful experience with disruptive technologies. I was at Kodak from 91 to 96, and would have been if I had not left the worldwide marketing director for digital imaging. But digital imaging killed Kodak. Kodak did not get that the technology they believed in, which was 80% gross margin analog film, was going to die eventually as a result of digital imaging. So they just kept pounding on the photography side. And in fact, I was worldwide product manager for their first consumer digital imaging product, Photo CD, if any of you follow any of that. And eventually I had to close out all of the equipment and mostly shut the business down. Just a bit of it was left. Realizing that, I took the opportunity when Sprint called and said, hey, how would you like to come be Vice President of Sales and Marketing for the launch of the first national digital cell phone network? Your cell phones wouldn't work without, they're all CDMA technology, they wouldn't work. I knew nothing about the industry, but that was the second disruptive technology that nobody got hurt really because all the players in the analog cell phone technology business shifted to digital. But it changed the way we use these devices, right? And so in 2012, I started teaching. I've always wanted to teach. I've taught in Vietnam, China. I've taught for 2 Vietnamese universities, for Cuca College, which is from the Finger Lakes in Vietnam and China. And I've taught for 5 American universities. I'm an adjunct on steroids. I taught here 1 semester while you were waiting for a new professor to come in to teach strategy. I taught the capstone MBA strategy and the capstone undergraduate strategy course here. This spring, I taught the capstone MBA strategy course at Daemen, and I'll come back to that in a minute. And in the fall, and we'll talk about this later, I'll be teaching 2 capstone sections of strategy for the University of Buffalo School of Management in Singapore, along with a project management course. I will comment about the spring. The spring was hell. We all got hit with it. I don't know how many of you have actually immersed yourselves in generative AI tools. Some of my students understood those tools. They were MBA students and they dove in. I tried to encourage them to use the tools. And I realized everything we know. And by the way, last June I got a degree from UB Graduate School of Education in the science of learning and teaching to top out decades of business experience. But nothing prepared me for this, right? And I'm not prepared for this. I'll wait until the cycle goes around and tell you what I'm thinking about for Singapore. But in Daemen, we really didn't know what to do, and I was so blindsided I didn't know how to try to incorporate generative AI. I encouraged students to use it in certain ways. It turned out for me to be the best tool possible to find out if the reference list in the students' research papers, because they had to turn one in, if the references were legitimate references and qualified based on the, what is it, the CRAP standard, right, C-R-A-P-P. I use that for every single paper to check the reference sections. And so that was my first real immersive use with it, and I use it every day now, and I'll shut up and let the process begin, let the fun begin.
Paul asked a question, and I wonder how many of you have played with, tinkered with the LM AIs? Okay. And my inclination, I'm going to push against my own inclination, is to jump to the scary stuff, the plagiarism questions. That's what I have done. So I'd rather start with Joshua or Josh? Josh, okay. So Josh said something I thought was interesting, to amplify human potential, and then Paul had his discussion of ways to use it positively. So let's start there and then head towards the scary things. One of you two, what do you think about amplifying human potential? How can we use this in the classroom in a positive way?
So, as an IT director, I'm not always in the classroom,
Sure.
but we're always thinking about the classroom and thinking about how what we're doing applies to the students. The first time AI came up, it was when a parent who had seen a scary news article called the superintendent's office and wanted to ensure that all AI things were blocked on our network. We had to go through an exercise of content filtering and things like that, and coming up with the, talking points and a statement and everything about AI, which is that we have a limited test group who is experimenting and making recommendations and forming policy. My experience with with the positive sides of AI have just been all over the place. I have a development team that I manage, and I know some of the colleges are probably familiar with. We're one of the first K-12 institutions that's doing e-diploma verification. So we're working with a company that we can provide our students with like a code. They can enter that code against our website, and it'll tell them if that's a valid high school diploma or not. Just prevents them from having to, it's hard sometimes for our students to get to their school to get a copy of their diploma. So one of the things that, as we kind of worked on rolling that out, we noticed this company has only worked with higher education, and higher education tends to have a bit more expertise in programming on their staff. We're on a skeleton crew, and we have been kind of since COVID. So in order to implement this e-diploma thing, you had to write something on your website that reaches out, calls an API, retrieves some XML data, parses it, and then displays exactly to the standards of this company, like whether the diploma is valid or not. It shows a credential and a seal and things like that. So they gave a 30-page PDF with all these different code examples and things like that. I kind of have been shouting about AI from the hilltops to my staff for months and months now, but I thought this was a great example to show how it could really be used. So we all got in a meeting. I shared my screen, kind of showed them the prompts that I went through, and we just straight text scraped that entire PDF, pasted that into an LLM, and we got back good code to create this whole website. It was text only. We had to put some more graphics on there and things like that, but it created the website, it created the code, it worked. We had to maybe make a couple small tweaks and things like that as we moved the code into production and things like that, but it did 99% of the work, and it was, we finished it at the end of the hour meeting. I feel like if I would have assigned that to one of my programmers, maybe 3-4 weeks later, he might have came back with some questions, but we would have never been able to make that kind of progress. And I just have, there's hundreds of other examples now since then, because the staff is really starting to take to it. I just think, like I said, I think it's going to amplify more than it's going to, there's going to be some drawbacks and things like that, but I just think the positives are going to outweigh the negatives.
Paul?
I'm dazed and confused. I have no idea.
Okay.
But I will share my thoughts. I've used summative and formative assessments. Summative, you're summarizing what the individual knows, usually MCQ, multiple choice tests, and so forth. And formative is they do an assignment, and you give them feedback on it. The way I have created those assignments in the past will no longer work. Telling them to go home and write something or submit a discussion post in Blackboard, or we now use Brightspace, we just switched to UB. It's a waste of time. I'm sure all of my students will know about, and most of them will have used, generative AI, not just ChatGPT, but Bing, the Microsoft search tool, is generative AI. It is ChatGPT, actually, it's the advanced version. Have any of you opened up a new empty document in Google Docs recently? Some of you have. Have you noticed the Help Me Write button right there on the page?
No.
That's generative AI. It will write for you what you wanted. I played with it a little bit, but the student gets an assignment, opens up Google Docs, clicks on Help Me Write, gives it a request, and more than likely it's going to help them do at least some of the work that they were supposed to do. So summative assessments and formative assessments are not useful if you're not assessing the student's knowledge. If you're assessing ChatGPT's knowledge, or Bing's knowledge, or Google Bard's knowledge, what's the point, right? So I am going to give my students agency this fall to make it productive, to try to get something positive out of this. I've created my syllabus, I've created my course calendar, I have assignments in the course calendar, I have some assessments already created, but the first week we're going to sit together for our class sessions and figure out how do we do this so that when you give me a response to an assignment, I know I'm grading your work. And I'm going to let them tell me. And many of the assignments I would have normally used are not going to happen anymore because there's really no point. It's just discussion assignments. I mean, they're pretty, you've all done discussions in an LMS, right? Blackboard or whatever you use. You guys use Brightspace, right?
Yeah, use Canvas.
So the one person posts, that'll in many cases come from ChatGPT or Bing or Google Docs. And then everybody's supposed to comment on that, and most of the comments, oh yeah, great, I agree with you. And it's really hard to get past that. But even if you find a way to prompt, a word we'll probably be using a few times tonight, prompt a student to give you a meaningful result, you can't keep the student from putting what they're commenting on into one of the AI tools and asking the AI tool to comment on it, and then pasting it in. So I really don't know. I know I have to meet certain student learning outcomes or goals. I put 2 on top of what's already in my syllabi. I put 2 generative AI learning goals because I want their business students, the capstone students, most of them will graduate either at the end of the semester or in the spring. Most of the project management students that I'm teaching will be juniors, but they're going to be using these tools in their careers as soon as they graduate. So I'm focusing on 2 things, the ethical and the effective use of the tools, but I'm going to rely on the student. We're the first time ever, by the way, I will be doing, for those who know qualitative research, I'll be doing action research in the project management course. And the students will be helping me design the assessments and the assignments in the course. And they will be using generative AI. There's no way I'm going to tell them not to do that. So that's where we are. I'll be less confused in the spring. If I can still think clearly at all.
Or a new kind of confused.
New kind of confused.
If I could share a comment on
Yeah, great.
As Paul was talking about the Google Docs, there also now Google Slides has the plugin where you can just don't do the whole presentation for you. You just download the plugin, Slides AI, and then you go to Google Slides, and then you ask it, create a presentation that has 10 slides about oxygenation in nursing, whatever it is. It will give you everything right. So just plugins are also opening, all these are really amplifying, the way in which, learning could be utilized for, potentially, utilized for students, or however you want to label that learning, and also ways in which professors will get, the deliverables. But I did want to comment on just, ways in which perhaps, I believe, large language models can help specifically, students and faculty. I do believe that they really bring a lot of opportunity for personalized learning. Specifically, there is a bunch of course, learning theories that would support, why to do specifically, personalized learning and how to do it in the classroom. But I feel like specifically having a chat box that where the student can say, I did not get the concept of oxygenation in nursing, and I'm really struggling to understand like how this relates to the lung sounds. Well, you can just ask ChatGPT like, what is this concept of oxygenation, and explain it to me as I'm a 5th grader. And there you go. If you don't get it at the 5th grader level, just go try with 2nd grader. Maybe it will give you. Maybe you get to get it. So it really, I mean, if you think about it just on the spot, right? Like I'm a professor too, right? So I'm in the classroom. All these students are struggling to get X concept. I can just open ChatGPT and be like, okay, well, let's see what ChatGPT can do. And explain what I'm trying to explain to you as a 5th grader. And there you go. You have a tool now that can automatically help you personalize that, that learning, that basically you're teaching also. So it's really a tool for benefit for students and also for faculty. That's one way. I mean, I feel like the other way is also, using it as and this is a little controversial, but I'm going to say it, for faculty members, for all of us that may teach, 5 or 6 classes, a semester and co-teach, as an adjunct, the universities, and have, and on top of that, you have a full-time job and a doctoral level, study all this. They can really help you grade. And you may be thinking, wait a second, there should be a faculty level, there should be a faculty, input on this, why are we, outsourcing this to AI? Well, I think, if you use it well, you can really have it be your writing assistant, and your grading assistant too. So it's like you have a TA but just AI. And an example of how I did it actually last semester during spring, I was teaching 3 classes. As I said, I'm a director for I have a full-time job where I'm taking 4 classes in my doctoral level studies because they had to, that was the only way in which they would teach those direct studies. So I'm writing papers. It's the end of the semester. I have to do all these things. I have like 90 students in my roster. I have, you all know the struggle, right? You're a professor. So I'm like, oh, okay, I have, and all these papers I have to grade and all these things. So, well, I decided to give the role to AI of, okay, well, you're a professor in the macroeconomics class, and this is the final, assignment for them, and I really put it there. And then I said, and this is the rubric that I utilize for this, and then to grade the assessment, and this is what a student input. And then from there, I read the student response. It's not that I didn't. I read the student response, and I was like, I would say something like this. I was thinking, right? But then I waited for what the AI would give me to see if it makes sense or not. And it was like, oh, actually picked up on way more things that I would have. So this is great. So at some extent, I automated some of that, some sort of the upgrading, which was a controversial statement when I said it actually in our AI learning faculty learning community, because they were like, wait a second, faculty cannot, which I mean, I was, they cannot, we cannot outsource our grading. Just,
It's controversial here too.
It's very controversial, but I just thought I would mention because it really brings a lot of opportunities to it if you know how to utilize it correctly and ethically as a faculty member too, right? So.
Yeah, Pat, and then.
Yeah, I'm curious about this concept of action research.
Yes.
What do you mean exactly by action research? Are you looking at things that people are doing like service learning projects, or are you doing something else related? I teach, just so you know, I'm teaching religious studies and theology, so I'm not, it's a different field than, say, mathematics or social sciences.
So action research is one form of qualitative research, and there are several ways it can be done. It can be done by somebody visiting it. It's about the classroom. In this case, it's about the classroom and evaluating the effectiveness and outcomes of the teaching methods in the classroom. It can be done by the professor who's teaching the course. That would be me, and that's what I'm going to do. You could bring somebody else in to do that for you. You have to decide what you have to have your research questions, and my research questions, what the hell do we do with generative AI in this classroom. It's project management, so it'll be related to learning about project management. And then it's just a methodology. My daughter, who's a PhD student, tells me it's a method, not a methodology, to evaluate the work that's going on in class and the outcomes of that work by collecting and analyzing artifacts. If you want to follow up later, I can give you a good book on that.
It's one of a lot of, I've had to recently rebrand as a qualitative researcher, and it's one of a lot of different approaches, like ethnography or an autoethnography. It's one of the tools in the qualitative researcher's toolbox.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Is it Jamie?
Yeah, Jamie, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I work online as an instructional designer at online professional programs and school management.
Oh, hi.
I work at Buff State and also with Humberto Hernandez, and I'm an adjunct at Buff State, and I teach pre-service art educators. And my class I teach there is about technology in the classroom, how to teach kids how to use technology, but also how to use it in your classroom. And most of my students are, I'm a painter, I'm a sculptor, but I gotta teach them how to use Adobe products or, the visual imagery and learn about copyright laws and, digital imagery as far as manipulation back from when people were retouching it back in the 1800s with, this kind of ink. They would manipulate photographs. They never took out pictures of certain people in some, pictures, things like that by hand versus now we've got computers. So when NFTs came to range a couple of years ago, I would put NFTs into my class. And one of the things we discussed there is about the generative music and generative imagery with NFTs, right? Now, ChatGPT explodes. Now I'm going to prep my class for this fall because I've changed my class every fall. Now we've got Adobe's got AI image generators right in the programs now. Yeah. So here it is. I got to redo my class again to talk more about this stuff because it impacts them as an artist, as an educator, and a professional. So it's kind of like all these concepts, whether it's business or what you're teaching, you also have the written stuff because it's the visual. It's all AI now. As a matter of fact, last night before I put my 10-year-old to bed, I got an Adobe Firefly, and I had him type in some prompts, like gorillas eating grapes with squirrels, or all kinds of crazy stuff to see the images. And every time you enter, kind of how it changes it. You put these filters on. So it's amazing how fast it's being incorporated into the search engine and into the software. But Adobe does tag the images so they know it was made by generative. They know they made a deal with, I don't know if it was Google or Amazon, whoever it was. I saw them on the news a few months ago about how they want to make sure that they tag these images in the metadata so people know it's not made by an artist, it's made by AI. So it's another take on all these different topics. It's writing, image, everything is going to go AI. So also think of that for another part of this discussion too, is the images that can generate it too. So I'm not sure if anyone's had a chance, if it's a freeware, you can go with Adobe Firefly and just go in and play with it. It's a lot of fun. Yeah.
So you have
Sure.
I'm Steve Shanley, retired Buffalo School psychologist and clinical psychologist. And the brain is designed to reduce the amount of energy it draws from the body. So it looks for stereotypes, shortcuts. Ethics goes out the window when something is very short and you're under time pressure. The most parsimonious solution is to chat box your way and then, quickly read it and change some words around. But unfortunately, and this is mostly the left part of the brain, which is kind of the one that culture shapes through learning and learning science and so forth. And I'm going to make a little bit of a leap. 40 years ago in the schools, when they came up with calculators, kids stopped learning how to do math in their heads. They no longer could go shopping to look at the price per unit because they can't do that because the machine does it. And you don't build the neural network that you need because the neural network, especially complicated thinking about abstract topics, college is full of that, takes a lot of time and energy. It occupies a lot of space. Chatbox will take away that demand for those neurons to form connections, and what you're going to get, I think, is a lot more right brain, emotional, music, socializing without much content, because it's easy and you don't have to form the complicated neural networks. Kids, you go on the, my buddy and I walk around Delaware Park and we talk all the time, but Everybody else seems to have these little wires coming out of their head. And I don't think they're listening to Albert Einstein's theory of relativity. I think, they have a lot of empty space in their mind, which they're filling with music. Anyway, so my belief, not tested and not research, is that the price is going to be too much to pay for the gains. And you'd have to license people that are able to use it. I like this idea that words that come out of Chat AI stuff has a different font or some way to be able to tag it. But otherwise, I think you're just the law of parsimony. You're just going to get a lot of people rationalizing why I just don't have time to grade all these papers because I'm doing too much, by the way. Take a break.
Thank you.
So can I just say, you just provided the foundational reason why we have to change the way the assignments we give and how we assess the work that's being done.
Yeah.
If the assignments are open to the students just delivering a ChatGPT document, we have not achieved what we need to achieve. We're not going to meet our learning goals. They're not going to achieve those. So everything you said I agree with, but the problem is our task now is how to get over that hump and still get the students to learn the things, develop the neural networks they're supposed to be developing. And that's why I said I'm dazed and confused. I'm not sure how that's going to work, but it's going to be face-to-face with the students having agency, with them understanding that we're going to do assessments that assess what you know. Now help me figure out how to do that. Because I mean, in Singapore, we're told don't let the students bring their watches to an exam, right? Because they've learned how to, and by the way, some of them do Morse code in the exams. So they have, in Singapore, if you do a final exam, they have a huge exam room with 100, 150 students, all in rows with their IDs on the table, and Dementors, anybody watch? Dementors walking up and down the aisles looking at them, right? So if they do Morse, they're not allowed to have their, but we have to figure that out. That's what makes this such a challenge for educators.
Well, it's an arms race, because now you have people selling ChatGPT, then you have people selling how to detect ChatGPT, then you're going to be having ChatGPT creating false documents and false certifications to certify people to do the checking. I mean, I don't know where it stops.
Well, read my research next spring.
You go ahead, and then I would like to take a step back and see where we are and before we go forward. So go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask some technical questions. Are you using ChatGPT 3.5 that is free, or are you paying for the Plus 4?
We pay for the Plus 4, yeah.
Yeah.
I see.
I use 4 with plugins.
The 4 with plugins,
Yeah.
I see. And have you been talking to Turnitin by any chance? I talked to them. By the way, I'm Joaquin Carbonero. I'm a faculty of the data science program at Buffalo State. And so when I asked IT that Jamie was part of it, they told me there's a webinar this Friday with Turnitin about ChatGPT. Great! I go to the webinar. I was the only person. It was a SUNY webinar.
Oh, yeah.
I was the only person.
No, all 64 campuses, you're the only one.
And the guy, the woman there didn't squat about the whole thing. She said, well, why don't you bring one of the technical, so we can read this stuff and tell you 40% that is likely to have been used ChatGPT and this and the other. But I say, okay, how do you do it? What is the procedure? What is your? She knows very little. So I think that you're not the only one confused. There is Turnitin is confused. Yeah. Colleges don't know where to go, and actually every day there is something new. Just yesterday I saw jazz creation using ChatGPT. You give the notes and the length of it. And then you say, okay, compose a jazz variation using, I don't know, Tinkle Tinkle Little Star. So then it will do it, and then you put in a MIDI, and it comes out perfectly okay. So there is video, music, there is, now mathematics for some reason is still not very good.
GPT-4 with code interpreter can analyze anything and do high-level statistics.
Wolfram Alpha has is one of the plugins.
Yeah.
And then Steve Wolfram has made a lot of work with OpenAI people and so on to try to connect them too. But if we could come up with an effective tool to do high-end mathematics, now that would be another change. That would completely change. We do science and technology. It's not there by any stretch. I mean, you could win $1 million. There are problems you solve and they give you $1 million. I mean, there is a 7 or 8 problem, but you could just use ChatGPT, solve them, and go cash $1 million. That's not going to happen in the near future. But so basically, and also the impact of calculators on people's mind activity. I just came from Rwanda, and in Rwanda, people with sandals and no helmets carry 100 gallons of water on their bike uphill. Here, I pay thousands of dollars to get a bike, special shoes, a helmet. So basically, we have, our body is the least exploited and used tool we have. And it's amazing, our body. But for some reason, we keep getting it, using it less and less and less. And so
parsimony. Use less energy. You know, if something allows you to have all your reward for lowered energy investment, it's going to be very attractive.
Yeah, well, one of our faculty went to a school just a class, and it told the students, you know, if you don't learn to do math in your head, when you go, you're going to be, there are errors all the time. You're going to be losing on the average.
Right.
We proved it, $20 a month. The student raised a hand and said, I'd rather lose $20 a month than learn mathematics. And unfortunately, but I mean, my English is not my native language, and ChatGPT has been, in the positive side, a blessing. Because I can tell ChatGPT what I want to say, and it tells me exactly what I wanted to say. I said, I love it. Finally, somebody really understands me.
You got to have a license then.
Can I just make one comment, though? If anybody is thinking of using the AI detector tools, whether it's Turnitin or SafeAssign or whatever, GPT-0, don't do it. They are totally unreliable. And as fast as they update those tools, ChatGPT or GPT-4, Bing will get ahead of them. It's a waste of time. It's a total waste of time. So, and you can get into big trouble accusing somebody of cheating based upon the data you get from those. You can't use it.
I think Europe, I have to bring the references, but they, in some countries, they made it illegal to a legal issue. I don't know exactly the level of punishment to claim that something is created by you when it was created by artificial. So, and that's a way to deal with it, I think, to make it illegal. It's just like, it's simply, if you write something, you have to, put a note there saying that this was created by ChatGPT.
Everything has to be handwritten now. That's it.
Yeah, no, I wish the Adobe could actually metadata tags those generative images that they're making.
Right.
The software.
Yeah.
I wish there's a way to do the same thing with text of ChatGPT. I'm not sure it's not on that side, but Adobe's doing that as part of what they're doing, with their technology.
Let's take a half step back and see, because we've got a lot of balls in the air, which is fine. Like, that's how this conversation is going to go. And Steve brought up some interesting points about the neural networks. And my initial response to that is, well, haven't we always been creating new neural networks ever since there were humans at all? But also, I'm equally terrified because of something that Mark says a lot, and that relates to what I do in freshman English classes, that Mark is a wizard and also a historian. And he's always talking about that, I'm going to put some words in your mouth. You don't care that much about dates. You care about thinking historically, right? Is that fair? And so teaching students how to think a particular kind of way about a thing that happened, and if they mix up what year something started, that's less important than thinking about how the thing happened, how it worked in the world. And when I go into my first year English classes, I want students to start moving past what is a very natural thing for 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds developmentally is to think very black and white, right, Steve? And that I want them to learn to think in a new, more nuanced kind of way and start pushing on some of those things and seeing the shades of gray in between. And so the thing that concerns me is that if I give an assignment about, there's this really common assignment in freshman English to analyze an ad for its rhetorical function, like the way that the ad sells the thing. And if they can just upload the picture or the text, and then it gives them the answer, they're skipping that step where they're learning that kind of finding the shades of gray in the Budweiser ad or whatever ad it is that they're looking at. And so I had notes here, and I was going to go through them, and then I skipped through my own system. Then we also have this question of data and what happens if we like. I don't love Turnitin as a company because I don't know what they do with all the student data that they collect, and I know less about what OpenAI and these other companies do with the student data that we're collecting. And so I like the idea of it grading for me. I would love that. But I'm not sure. Also, we had this question earlier today. We were talking about the differences between a humanities classroom and a science or technical classroom or a social science classroom. But I think one of the things that we're going to find ourselves doing is what Paul was talking about, is that we're going to have to be creating new kinds of assignments. Like teaching students to talk to the thing would be a kind of critical thinking. I would rather than not do that. I'd rather than think about the poem itself, rather than figuring out a way to talk to the AI about how to talk to the poem. Or maybe the best case scenario is that we have them do both. But then it sounds like we're getting a lot of extra work for ourselves in the process of doing that we're teaching. Also, I don't really, my expertise is teaching writing, and I don't have the expertise or the understanding of these large language models to explain to my adjuncts how to handle it, much less handle it myself in class.
I want to share a thought.
Yes, great.
So I want to share a thought that perhaps relates to what you were mentioning about the neural networks, the assessment types, and what can we do, perhaps. Yeah. And it is this thought of like, and I'm gonna say this in my role of also a student, right? No, I'm skipping professor, this instructional designer or the director, etc. I'm just gonna say as a student, what does the workforce need? Because I think that's important to mention. What does the workforce need, and what are they going to require me to do based on that assessment type, based on that neurological networks? Is my effort could be less, and can I just use the shortcut? It's just really a shortcut though to utilize AI if the assessment type is asking me to critically analyze or assess or create something, which will be a higher level, thinking skill, and is something that most likely in the workplace it looks as, oh well, I'm gonna have AI next to me and my computer, and no one else is gonna be right in front of me. Like how are you gonna do it? So why would I not just keep the name wherever and just do it if I am the professor? Like in the workplace it looks like that. Side note, I'm just thinking of this as a coder, right? Because I also code. So if I'm a coder, and it's not supposedly, but it's hard. I do have to learn all these different things. But if I can just, as you mentioned, it was easier for me to have a job done of that would have been 3 weeks in just 1 hour. You know what I mean? So why would someone ask me to parse out all the code if that's the assessment type in coding, and I had to do it because I also took this coding class. So why would someone make me parse out all this code when I know that I can just add it to ChatGPT and have the answer? So I'm giving the answer just as a student.
No, I
go ahead.
I am not unsympathetic to that, but also I don't care what the workforce needs. Maybe that's controversial, but my position as someone who teaches English is to teach thinking and writing. And I don't teach an MBA capstone course, and that would be a place where I would really think harder about what a workforce might need. Now, I can play the game that I'm asked to play sometimes, which is to say, well, writing is a transferable skill that is usable in other places. And so as students go through their academic career, they'll get into Marx history class, and then they'll use the writing skills from English in there, and then they'll do so in their sociology classes, and then eventually they're going to need to be able to write in the workforce. Now, it's not that I don't believe that, but that's not why I think English is important. I think English is important and writing is important because writing is important. And I know that's circular, but that's just true. And so that leads me back to my same question again. Like, what kinds of things who teaches in the humanities in this room? Sciences? Okay. So, social sciences? Education? Okay. And we're all going to have to find ways within our individual fields to navigate what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. I'm working on a paper right now that I wrote way too much. I thought I was sending it to one journal, now I'm sending it to another, and so the 10,000 words I wrote need to be 3,000. Is it ethical for me to put my paper into ChatGPT and say, I want this 10,000 word paper to be 3,000 words?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know.
Do you use Grammarly?
No.
You
Good
don't
Lord,
use
no.
any grammar?
Friends
No,
don't let
no,
friends
no,
use
no,
Grammarly.
wait a minute, wait. I touched the nerve. Do you use any grammar checkers, spelling checkers at all?
I use spell check.
Okay,
But-
you've been using AI for...
Of course I
Yeah,
have,
already
but there's a line there.
It's
This
degree,
is not
it's qualitative
like,
difference.
Yes. Those aren't the same. Like,
What I think that we need to revisit what learning is, how cognition works. So I asked ChatGPT how many types of intelligence are there and how many ways of teaching it. And then the first one that came out is the only one that I use in my entire career. That is a static model where you learn things in a book and then you answer the answers in the back of the book. And then that's what we've been doing for ages and ages and ages. And there's one type of intelligence. And it is very unfortunate that ignores the intelligence of applying things, the intelligence of adapting, the intelligence of... so he came out, ChatGPT gave me like 10 types, and then going through each one of them with the references and the psychologists that were supporting it. I found the whole thing very interesting, and it's engaging me into rethinking of what learning is and what intelligence is. So it's having these conversations back and forth with ChatGPT is just like going to a library and reading different books, but a little bit faster.
I'm going to push back on that a little bit. Last week, you all told us that ChatGPT wasn't smart, that it wasn't intelligent, that it wasn't...
That's correct.
But now you're saying you can have a conversation with it. Is that a conversation?
Maybe the conversation is the wrong word.
Okay.
But I certainly I talk like to a person.
Sure.
I say, I am confused about, for instance, we were doing research in genomics, and I said, well, I didn't understand what an anchor is, because it's a very complicated way of dealing with treatments using genetics. And I said, but explain it to somebody who is not a biologist. Gave me so basically, it has the ability to summarize. And it seems like magic, but every new piece of technology is magic. This is pretty magic already.
Of course it is. Yeah, they didn't have even a tenth of this to
Right.
go to the moon.
Right. And in regard to the marketing and job market, the only reason why we hire faculty or teachers or engineers is because it's a need in society or something we don't have. You're not going to have spelling bee competitions in South America, because spelling in Spanish is totally boring. Everybody would get every word correct all the time. So every word, everybody knows how to spell every word.
Everything is phonetic.
So if everybody here was born with a perfect English, say, module in their brain, there wouldn't be a need for English professors, because they will already have it from the time they're born. And Steve Pinker, he claims that language is a sense. And I think that mathematics is also a sense. There may be...
I don't know if we want to debate Steven Pinker right now, but in a nutshell, I think he's wrong.
Well,
about
could
that.
be. No. The part about the sense is a scientific fact. I mean, it's not.
Can I chime in?
That's not how the linguist would read it. Yeah.
Back to your 10,000 word, I don't know what it is, War and Peace, that you have to cut down to 3,000
It's
words. So, is it ethical? My daughter's a PhD candidate in cultural anthropology. I had her read my dissertation several times before submitting the final version. it was in education. Mine is about experiential learning. But she could see if what I was saying made sense. Was that unethical?
No.
Okay, so if I gave that same dissertation to GPT-4 or Claude, which is, if you haven't used it, is really powerful, is it unethical to ask that for feedback on the clarity?
I don't know if it is or not.
No,
That's what I'm saying.
I would say it's okay,
But to ask it for
because it's
feedback
his original thought.
It's different.
But
And it's doing
different than
some
asking
kind
it
of
to
a
condense it to 3,000
logical
words.
parsing by saying, you know, these themes, the words have similar meanings, you can follow the meaning, you know, lasts for 2 paragraphs, then the meaning stops, you know, and then the next section doesn't connect. There's a way to parse it that is just a derivative
Yeah.
skill, which
Right.
is nice that they do it, not you.
But you could get into whose intellectual property was used to train the model that
Right.
allowed it to reduce
That's
your
certainly
paper
what's happening in the
fidelity.
visual
I
of
mean,
it. Like I have this ongoing fun thing I do where I create a golden griffin working in a writing center. I think it's funny, but I'm probably stealing somebody's work to do that.
So can I jump in with one more thing? Because
Yeah.
this is an undercurrent to the things we've been talking about when we get ChatGPT or Bing or Claude or any of these to do something for us. And this is one of the areas where I think we need to teach the students. First of all, the ethical use of the tools. Second, then, would be the practical use of the tools. But then ultimately, when you get that stuff from whatever tool you're using, is it accurate? Because I will open up GPT-4 with my plugins and Bing and put the same prompt in when I'm trying to do something. They'll give me different results. And one or the other of them will have a whole bunch of crap, not CRAPP, but garbage in them, that I have to filter out. And we need to teach our students that. If they're going to be using these tools, I'm being prescriptive now,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I try not to be, but if we're going to teach them to use these tools, they have to know how to know what's right. And to do that, they have to have the fundamental knowledge.
And that's where we need to learn where the ethical line is. Like 20 years ago, was this morning we were talking about Wikipedia? And Wikipedia was dismissed out of hand. If it showed up in a paper, it was an F. Now, I still discourage the use of Wikipedia as a source to cite, a final source. But I also tell students, you know, depending on the quality of the Wikipedia page itself, it might have some sources that you would find really useful if you scroll down to the bottom and look into them yourself. They weren't as good at sourcing in 2003 or whenever it started. And so it's a different thing, and we know what to do with that now. And so we might just be in the middle of a thing that we don't know what to do yet.
I triggered some people.
Oh, great.
My world until Canisius was K through 12. I was a teacher, middle and high school, then administration, principal, up through superintendent of schools. So I'm always looking at, and I studied when I was doing my research around learning and around the role that typically, historically, has been given students as learners as opposed to feeding them information, expecting them to memorize. I completely agree with what you just said, that the students should be partners in determining the productive uses of AI, where it will fall short, because it's not a brilliant, it's not without its flaws, and it does take a master editor function, which is a thinking human being, to review information and determine whether or not this is truly representative of what you believe the correct thought processes are. And I think for too long, we have prohibited students from taking active roles in determining what and how they learn. And so I see this as a tool that, number one, will help teachers become better teachers. It will help students become more productive and engaged and excited learners. And I see that the quality of what will happen in education will be profoundly better as a result of using this in an appropriate way. It's a tool, just like the calculator was 40 years ago, that we were so afraid of, and I agree with you. There are limits to that because my grandchildren don't know how to add numbers in their head. They're always getting out a calculator, and when I go to hand someone change, and they don't know how to make change, it makes me crazy. And it's adults, not just students. So I understand that we've lost some of the things that were time-honored traditions, but I see us at the cusp of doing some extraordinary things in terms of improving how people feel about the engagement of learning and becoming much more analytical and thoughtful in the learning process.
than students have historically been.
I think you're probably right, if we make sure that they don't skip steps.
I'd like to suggest that it's a real mischaracterization to think of this as a tool, in the same way that if Albert Einstein walked into the room and he said, oh great, this is a great tool I can use, I'll just keep it in the closet and ask him questions. In the same way, I think that these AI intelligences are already close to surpassing humans in many ways, and I think that would be even more so in just a few months or years. I'm kind of in the we're doomed camp. But I'm curious what you say that writing and thinking and writing is good. Why is thinking and writing good or useful or purposeful if machines can do it way, way better?
Okay, I have an answer.
Not better, just faster, cheaper.
I guess we have to decide at some point how much we want to continue commodifying education to the point where it's all about a set of skills that we hand off for people to then function within a economic system. That's what I would say. That's how we have to decide. And so then that would lead us to trying to figure out, because I don't think it's going to create the same kind of art, for example. And if we keep pushing and keep turning college into a set of skills that you learn to get a job, then that's, if that's the direction we keep going, then we're going to lose something. I don't know if we have words for what that we're going to lose. We're going to lose a certain kind of thinking, a certain kind of inhabiting the world. In my world, we call it a comportment, a way of facing the things that we need to face. Steve, I've learned one person's name.
I think some people are going to run with this, and it's going to be wonderful for that segment of the population, 5% maybe, that could make creative use of it. The bulk of people are going to get dumber because life is moving fast, and they're going to take shortcuts. The reason rote learning was the initial type of teaching is because people were pretty concrete in their operations. They didn't have abstract thought. We got plenty of abstract thinkers now. The issue, I think, is it's going to put people out of work. I mean, that's the sociological impact of it. Writers, teachers, people that are teaching assistants that don't have to grade anymore. And what are these people going to do if they cannot work?
I wouldn't say as much put them out of work, but it will change the nature of what the work is. It will. It's already happened. It's happened. You go into McDonald's and there's not human beings, there's a computer screen.
Yeah.
You go into the movie theater and there's a computer screen where there used to be a person. So the nature of work is changing, and I think it's up to us to teach the adaptive skills to be able to bend and flex around what the work will be.
It's also up to us to make sure that this doesn't become another, this should make people's lives better, not just put them out of work. Right? That it should be, and maybe you were going to say something similar. But I think underneath all of our disagreements, I think we have the same philosophy about it.
Yes, and I wanted to say that I'm so thrilled to finally see the Industrial Revolution over. It's over, this mechanization of education, making the education mechanic. I mean, I said the United States has been one of the ones have been mostly hurt by it. I mean, everybody thinks that the Industrial Revolution made the United States rich, but I beg to disagree. I think that what was lost is a lot more than what was gained. And if you go to other places in the world where they are not fully industrialized countries, you see how the actual body, that is what we are is all about, it works so much better than we think here. So we are, and the number one step, students have to be empowered in the classroom, and that is number one thing. I've been full force going in that direction already for a couple of years, and it works so well.
So I think what I'm hearing is that maybe the AIs are only forcing us to do what we were supposed to do 30, 50 years ago.
Yeah. We are going
what
back
Mark
to
isn't saying is that he loves to say that.
And I'm with you. I don't know. I have, my syllabus has gone down in flames now 4 times in the last 4 weeks. I had no idea what to do starting in 10 days from now. But and I don't have time. I
Empower the students to come up with the idea.
Well, I mean, this is the thing. I also have said to colleagues, like, give yourself grace that this is going to be a tough semester and you're going to have assignments that are totally annihilating. Like, there isn't time. And, you know, well, this is not that, I don't know what to, I mean, this is something new. We did this 3 years ago. You didn't have time to teach online. You didn't have time to learn to teach online. You did your best. And, you know, you didn't feel like you were doing your best, but it was. And we're all still here. And, you know, so, in fact, the last D2L workshop I gave to faculty was March 18th in this room. And I quoted Mao Zedong on guerrilla warfare. I said, when the enemy retreats, then we will be back. You know, once our, and well, here we are, but now we're faced with this. But yeah, you know, it's going to be a rough semester. It's going to be a rough year. But maybe now we're just forced to do what we were supposed to. Do.
I would say that we're still in a phase of exploration. I think this is the moment where you have to try it all, see what works. Honestly, I think there's like this. I keep reading about like academic productivity through AI, and I just bump into all these things that I'm talking about, like teaching assistants, like how is this going to help students? Like see it through those lenses, and you'll see that you go through. You know, you go through this because if you see it as they're just going to cheat, they're not going to learn what they need to learn. Well, then push it. You know, like in front of the classroom, there's where you need to really grasp it. You know, and also in your assessment, you have to do what I forgot. I don't know. I called her name. But she said the assessment type should be about the process of instead of the product, and I agree 100%. You know, how you get to that analysis is going to be key for us to understand in front of the classroom. Like, explain me that. You know, even if they don't, even when you know that they're going to take a shortcut to complete the assignment that, like hours later they're going to complete, make sure that we're intentional with the questions that we have in the classroom and say, okay, walk me through that process now. Like, say it, explain to me, to make sure that we are reinforcing those neurological networks that at the end are going to create this critical thinking or whatever you want to label it, right? That they need to learn. Other than that, see it through like academic productivity, and then you'll see the light at the end of the tunnel. Otherwise, I think we're going to get into very deep waters.
I want to just emphasize, you used a word that is key to my thinking, intentionality. As teachers this semester, we have to be intentional. We can't assume the students don't have access to ChatGPT. We can't assume they won't use it. We can't assume that just saying go home and write something is going to give a product that demonstrates any learning on the part of the student. But it's intentionality. Every one of us has to be completely intentional about every step we take with our syllabi, with our assignments, with our assessments, and how we actually interact with the students. There's going to be a lot more conversations in my classrooms. And I meet and talk with the students all the time anyway. There's going to be a lot more. Because that's the one way I can find out if you understand what you need to understand today. The problem is, some of you probably have 200 students in a class. That's hard to do.
That's true.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that a few years back, UB, the AI club or something, they had an international figure talk about ethics in self-driving cars, which is, it can be translated verbatim to what we're saying here. And this guy is super famous with all kind of grants. He broke up the world into 3 ethical groups, which AI probably will be the same, with ChatGPT. So basically, if you are driving a car, and then should you say, save the life of somebody younger versus older, or somebody this versus the other, and then in Germany they passed a law saying that you cannot ever, with the intelligence ChatGPT, benefit one human being from another. We don't have such laws, but in regard to ethics, there is a lot that has been done, but how much do you hear about this on the news? How much do we find out about, and not enough? And it's unfortunate that this is part of, for instance, I don't know, have you seen any of the books by Harari? The Homo sapiens?
Yeah.
Do you remember what he said? What is the difference between artificial intelligence and human intelligence? I don't know if you've heard of
The Homo Deus, is there a Homo?
No, I think that was in the 21 lessons of the 21st century, the latest one. He claims that the difference between artificial intelligence and human intelligence is that human intelligence has suffering. Suffering is what is behind ethics, while artificial intelligence doesn't have that. I mean, there is a lot of people that have come up with very interesting ideas and very, very interesting scenarios. There is entire books from the Future Thinking Institute. That is, how many people have heard of a Future Thinking Institute? Not too many, but they work for the government, they work for companies, and they simply concoct futures, say this is what could happen based on what we see. And they have one book where they see the world dominated by 9 companies, Google, Microsoft, and a few from China. In any case, there are all these new ways of looking at things, and how do we, faculty, get up to speed? Because we are in a position of leadership and in the classroom and in the universities, and I don't think that we are going fast enough. I mean, for instance, UB, the graduate director of undergraduate studies, she is having one of her classes taught by a student. Forget about just participating. The whole class is taught by a student, talking about empowering. That is number one. There has to be a complete. I mean, we cannot go to the classroom and just make carbon copies of we are. Okay, I know exactly this material with 20 definitions. You're going to give them back to me exactly. And if you give me 18, I give you a B. I mean, that doesn't work with AI. And AI is blowing all of this out of the way. And to me, I see it as a very exciting future in front of us, if it's done right.
All right, it is. Mark, are we are 10 minutes past. So it's after 7, and the way this worked last week, we stopped, and then we sat around and talked more.
With cookies and brownies.
With cookies and brownies and water. And the faculty lounge is that way. The first door past what Mark was calling the transept, past the Little Wall Street, which is the stock ticker on the side. So, I don't know if other people call it that. The English department calls it Little Wall Street. Thank you all for coming.
You ignited a conversation, is the way I would put it, and it burned brightly.
And the next,
I think it's still. The next event is August 22nd, which is Tuesday. Identical geography. So this room, education. Old Main 223 is business or enterprise, broadly speaking, and the suites will be in the lounge that's a diagonal that direction. So we have the final event in the series is on September 12th. That will probably be in a different building, and we're going to begin to heavily promote that pretty soon next
year. That is a conversation specifically about ethics, right?
It's I don't know that we defined as sort of a guiding theme. One of the sessions. Excuse me. One of the sessions does feature a Niagara University philosopher who has worked with AI and ethics specifically for many years, and so he's going to speak in one of the sessions, and then there's another session that's going to be attended.
If anybody would like to continue the dialogue, I've brought some business cards. You can get in touch. For the next week, I'm going to be out of touch because I'm going to Singapore, and I told my wife I'm getting really anxious about all the packing and everything. But after that, I'd love to carry on some conversation.
I'll be the one to ask for Brightspace if we need it, because I work over in the online professional programs, and I was working with Nicole today on the Singapore course.
Yeah.
So I've been helping the team.
Yeah, I asked for some help. I'm creating one of 2 sections in Brightspace because we've been in Blackboard, and I'm going to copy it over. And they just gave me a link and said, "Go read this."
It'll be me or Jane helping you out.